Hello, welcome to Mysterios Divinas podcast. Today, we're diving into a mystery that's been hiding in plain sight, right there in the very first words of the Bible.
Have you ever thought that maybe, just maybe, within the most famous verses of the Bible, there's a secret story? A story of a world that existed long, long before ours. Well, today we're going to explore an idea that suggests exactly that, a secret hidden right in the opening lines of Genesis.
All right, let's jump right into it. We're starting at the very beginning of everything, where a potential gap in time, a sort of cosmic pause, might just change everything you thought you knew about the creation story.
Okay, look at the dramatic shift right here. Verse 1 gives us this picture of a perfect, complete creation, but then verse 2 immediately throws us into a world of chaos and emptiness, without form and void. It's a jarring contrast, and it's the source of a massive question. What on earth happened between these two moments?
And that apparent contradiction? Well, that's the exact puzzle that something called the gap theory was designed to solve. It gives us a framework for understanding that mysterious interval between a perfect creation and a world in total chaos.
So, what is it, really? In a nutshell, the gap theory suggests that an entire age, a whole lost period of history, exists in that space between verse 1 and verse 2. This means the six-day creation story isn't the beginning of everything, but more of a recreation, a reconstruction built on the ruins of a world that came before. And this is where the theory gets really fascinating. It opens the door to the possibility of an pre-Adamic world, a world populated by beings who lived and died before the story of Adam and Eve even began. Now, according to the theory, this wasn't just some world of plants and animals. No, it was home to a civilization of beings with intelligence and, crucially, free will. Beings whose story, proponents argue, is hinted at in the shadows of the biblical text.
The theory goes that this lost civilization lived out a complete history. It had a glorious creation, a tragic fall, and finally, a cataclysmic destruction. And all of this happened before Adam's story was even a thought.
So that chaos we read about in Genesis 1:2, the earth being without form and void, the theory says that's not the raw material for creation. Instead, it's the aftermath. It's the rubble, the cosmic scars left behind from the judgment and destruction of that previous world.
As you can imagine, a theory this big doesn't just fill a gap in time. It blows open a whole universe of theological questions about God, the nature of evil, and the grand cosmic plan. It really forces us to ask some deep questions, right? I mean, if these beings existed, what was their spiritual journey like? Were they subject to sin and redemption, just like humanity? Or did they play a totally different part in the cosmic drama?
This whole perspective really challenges the conventional idea that the Genesis creation story is the absolute beginning of everything. It suggests that major, world-altering events happened before the earth became a home for Adam and Eve, forcing us to rethink the entire timeline of divine history.
But as compelling as this theory is, it's definitely not without its critics. It faces some pretty significant challenges when you hold it up against broader biblical and theological scrutiny.
And here's where we get to the core conflict. Mainstream Christian doctrine teaches that death entered the world as a direct result of Adam's sin. The gap theory, though, requires a massive cycle of death and destruction before Adam even existed. That's not a small detail, that's a fundamental theological contradiction. And on top of that, how do we square this theory with other scriptures? Especially the genealogies that consistently trace all of humanity back to Adam as the first man. The theory creates these tensions that are really hard to resolve within the bigger biblical narrative. So this brings us to the central dilemma, doesn't it? We have this fascinating, mysterious theory that seems to solve one biblical puzzle, while at the same time, it potentially creates several new ones. Is it just inspired speculation, or is it a hidden truth? Ultimately, the gap theory exists in this delicate dance. On one hand, it's this incredibly compelling speculation that sparks our imagination and makes us ask these huge questions about time and divine purpose. But on the other hand, for it to be considered truth, it really has to stand up to the critical light of Scripture and hold together theologically. And so, the mystery remains, nestled right there between two verses. Now you tell me, what do you think? Does this theory intrigue you? Or do you think it creates more problems than it solves?
If you like the video, subscribe, leave a like, comment on what you liked most, and share the video. We'll see you next time.